So, big warm welcome. It's lunchtime, and I really, really appreciate people giving up some free time over their lunch to join us. We don't do this kind of lunchtime session very often, and I've been really amazed by how many people are keen to come. So thank you all. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jo Balfour, and I'm the Managing Director of Cambridge Rare Disease Network, or CamRARE for short. The people that we're really hosting for this session today are good friends of ours through something called the Rare Disease Research Network. And that's a platform which CamRARE and the Patient-Led Research Hub set up in November 2024. And it's a place where we would really encourage you to join for a start, whether you're from a patient organisation, you live with a rare disease, whether you're a researcher or from industry. It's a platform where you can connect with others interested in rare disease research. And most importantly, if you're from the patient community, you can share your own research ideas. There's a whole series of resources on there that help you through your research journey. And most importantly, we're helping with some hand holding. So if you come with a great idea to the platform, we'll connect with you and we'll mentor and support you through the process and help connect you with the right people. So, Lindsay, if you wouldn't mind, it'd be great if you could add in the chat the link to the RDRN platform, and then anybody can join from there.
Just gone in, Jo.
Thanks, Helen. Can I also just ask two of my team members to give a wave? Helen Boyd is our operations manager, and you'll be seeing a lot more of her in the coming months and years. She's new to our team in September last year. And Lindsay Brown, who's also waving at the moment, who's our events and projects officer. So thanks both for joining. Now I'm going to move on. So today we're here to hear from an organisation called Share4Rare. And Share4Rare is based in Barcelona. And you can see by the beautiful building in the background of Elena and Begonia's slides there, that's where they're based. Do you want to give us a wave, Elena, so we can see who you are? Okay, so we're going to be hearing from both in this session. We're going to have lots of opportunities for interaction with you. So please do, as you're listening, be thinking, what are my questions for the speakers? Because we've allocated quite a decent chunk of time for Q&A with you. So I'll lead that bit later. But basically, Share4Rare is a platform that puts people with rare conditions and their community and families at the heart of rare disease research. So they combine community, education, and most importantly, patient-reported data. We're going to hear lots more about that later. Helping generate new insights into conditions that are really underserved and often understudied. Now, for those of you who saw the UK Department for Health and Social Care Rare Disease Landscape report a year or so ago, it really shone a light on the lack of rare disease research. So on one hand, it was great to see lots of investment and to see the 150 diseases that were getting attention. But if you looked closely at that, there were really 5 diseases that got most of the attention in terms of research and resources. What we're trying to do with the Rare Disease Research Network and Share4Rare is to open up research to more patient communities so that those diseases that are getting no attention start to get into the limelight too. Speakers today are going to walk us through the Share4Rare platform. They're going to talk to us about the kind of studies that platform can support, about patients, researchers, and organisations collaborating through the platform to generate really meaningful data. So without further ado, I'm going to move on to our first speaker, who is Begonia. So over to you, Begonia. I'd like you, if you wouldn't mind, just to introduce yourself and say who you are, what you do, where you're from, and then, yeah, you can begin your talk. Thank you.
Great. Perfect. Thank you so much, Joe, and to everybody that this afternoon it's today in this webinar. For us, it's so important to have this space to share, and it's part of our, let's say, mission, share what we do and collaborate beyond the walls of this hospital that you can see in the back. I'm Begoña Nafria. I'm the head of patient engagement in research at Sant Joan de Déu Children's Hospital. For the ones that you don't know, our institution, this is the largest pediatric hospital in Spain. We are a maternity children hospital. We cover all the pediatric specialties, and basically 80% of our patients, they live with a rare condition. Said this, the mission of our department is devoted to involve children when possible and families in research. And basically, in rare diseases, what we have seen after many years working with families is that there is a goal about data that we never can have in a hospital if we never ask the patients and the families, because not everything that can be substantial, relevant, or can be, part of a research project, it's in our electronic health records. And there are plenty of data, also information about the patient's experience, quality of life, that it's very relevant in research, not only to know better these conditions, that this is probably one of the gaps that we have. Still, we have conditions for those that we don't know the natural history of the disease, that we don't have patient registries. We have a lot of challenges. But what we have seen after many years working hand by hand with patients, families, and patients' organizations is that working together, probably we can solve these gaps and these unmet needs. And this is, let's say, the beginning of a long journey, because we know that it's a long journey, but we need to start at some point and say, okay, we need to know about this condition. We need to know how many patients are living with this disease. If it's a condition that it's, heterogeneous or not, the progression of the disease. Usually, when you receive the diagnosis of a rare condition, everything it's about questions, and not everything can be answered. And joining, let's say, the intelligence, the data, the experience, many information that, as I said, we can never have in the walls of our hospital, or even, at national level, if we connect our systems, is how we try to do research and how we envisioned many years ago the concept about what is nowadays Share4Rare. It was a project that came from a pilot initiative that at 2018 we had the opportunity to build at the European level, because we got a grant from the European Commission. And at that point, based in our experience in the pilot project that I mentioned, what we did was co-create with patient organizations and colleagues from academia the concept of Share4Rare, based in the added value that there is this data and this information that I already mentioned that you have as a patient or as a patient organization that we never have in the hospital. And the other point is that there are boundaries if you try to do research, starting from at least the situation that we have in Spain, that the National Registry of Rare Diseases is not mandatory. And sometimes it's impossible for us to know if there are more patients in Spain than the ones that we have in our systems. And the idea of Share4Rare is to try to help to break boundaries in terms of geographical, distribution of patients, because sometimes it's not relevant only to research with the patients that live with a rare condition at country level. We need to work with an international perspective. And secondly, about the language. And what we have at that moment is a platform that it's, all the environment, all the interface accessible in Spanish, in English, in Italian. And if it's, any chance to do a project in a language that at that moment there is no included in the platform, we can add it, because it's how we have evolved the platform. Said this, this platform is aligned with the mission of our institution, that it's this very fancy and very used concept about patient centricity. For us, it's really a concept that we try to apply in everything. And what we try to promote is that if you are interested to build a patient registry, analyze the quality of life of your condition, whatever the objective, the goal of your research, build together this project, because you are an expert in the disease, we are experts in research, and together probably we can solve these boundaries, these unmet needs that I mentioned. There are communities of patients very well organized, and nowadays they have patient registries, they know the natural history of the disease, and probably some of them, they are lucky to have a targeted treatment. But this is not a common standard in rare diseases, because there are thousands of conditions that they don't have, any of these elements. And our aim is to help to start this long pathway that I already mentioned, and do it together, because probably in 5-6 years, if you already decide to start now to build a patient registry and know about the natural history, probably it can be a potential treatment, and this information can be used as a control arm or to identify patients. For me, research, it's an investment. As I said, it's a long journey, but if we never start, usually these conditions are going to be, of course, orphan, but not only in treatments, also in knowledge. And it's so difficult to take care of patients if we don't have the knowledge about these conditions. In this case, I'm speaking about the perspective of academia, but at the end, knowledge allows you to try to care as much better you can of these patients living with these diseases. Said this, it's relevant and important that you know that this project has been evolved. Initially, as I said, it was a project granted by the European Commission. We co-created the platform, we did pilot projects, but now, after all this learning curve, what we are, it's open to help and to work together with communities of patients that you think that we can provide an added value to your disease. And this is basically the goal of this webinar: explain how the platform operates. Joe said that we work in education. For us, it's important empower the patients and the communities. We have medical books, we have a podcast in Spanish. In this case, it's not yet in English. For us, the community piece, it's important, and community, it can be inside of the platform, but for us, make connections, it's relevant, because probably you have a specific need, and we know, colleagues from academia that can support you and work with you. And of course, the heart and the core and the added value of this platform, it's research. And research always thinking in this long journey that at the end, can, facilitate, if possible, the research in treatments, because it's the main worry about, anybody living with a rare condition. We know that it's challenging. We know that in some conditions, probably we cannot cure these diseases, but at the end, the aim of everybody working in research and in medical care in rare diseases is quality of life. And part of, the interventions that we can do in quality of life is because we know better these conditions. This is in summary, the reason about Share4Rare. It's very aligned not only in the concept of patient centricity, as well in the concept of openness, and in a term that we use in our institution about liquid hospital, arrive where we can help in the community, not only at country level. And in this case, happy to help, to listen, and to be close to you if you think that at some point we can help you. This is my short introduction. Now I will hand over to Elena, that she is managing the platform, and she can explain better than me the details and the granularity about the services and activities that we do, and also encourage all of you to the questions and answers interaction. And as well, we will have today with all of you, Diana. She is part of my team as well, that it's going to explain you, which is let's say, the formal process that we have if you have a specific need of a research project using the Share4Rare tools. This is all from my side, and happy to help in the questions and answer time. Thank you.
Thank you for the brief introduction there. And I'm going to pass over straight, I think, to Elena. Do you want to jump in at this moment and start to really kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the platform itself, what it can offer, how people can use it, and what we hope to achieve by this partnership. Did you want to share your slides? I'll just
Sure. Thank you, Jo. I'll share the slides.
Do you want to introduce yourself first?
Yes. Well, as Begoña said, my name is Elena Martinez. I am part of the team in Share4Rare. I am managing the platform, and as well as the projects, the research projects that are taking place in the platform, as well as the community, which is formed by patients, caregivers, and patient organizations. So that's why I'm going to show you a little bit, not the inside of the platform, but what the platform is and what it is for, and what it can be useful for you as patient organizations, as patient, or even as researchers. So now, if you can confirm that you can see this, you can see in the screen.
Yep, we're all good.
Okay.
Yes, we can see the slides.
Thank you. Okay, so let's talk a bit about how to conduct research based on, when we talk about research in Share4Rare, we refer to that research which is based on the patient-reported data. That's why because in Share4Rare we have a community of patients, so we can take advantage of this and ask this community to report their data in order to gain knowledge on rare diseases. So that's the main aim of the platform. And as you mentioned before, Share4Rare is a platform with the aim of empowering patients, not only patients, individual patients, but also patient organizations. And it's based in 3 pillars, as you said. The first one is education and information. Second is community. And third is research. In the information and education pillar, what a patient or a user of the platform can do is, finding this information on rare diseases, which is trustful, and also they can learn on all topics which are related to research in rare diseases. Then in the community pillar, what we try to encourage is for the community to share experiences and knowledge, and also to contact to each other, and also to different patient organizations which are also as members of the platform. And finally, in the research area, what users from Share4Rare can do is they can report data which are very valuable for researchers in order to contribute on the knowledge on research on rare diseases. So what kind of activities or content do we have in Share4Rare regarding education and outreach of the rare diseases knowledge? Well, we have what we call medical books. Begoña just mentioned that before. These are content which is result from the many studies that we undertake in the platform. At the end of a study, we have generated knowledge on a specific disease, so we can put all that knowledge together and put it in this form of what we call medical book. This is an open and public content. It's accessible to everyone who visits the platform, not only for users. Also open to public is our blog. We publish owned content content from our own activities, from not only from Share4Rare, but also from the hospital. Our focus is always research, so all content is related to that activity of research in rare diseases. And finally, at the right side of the slide, you can see here a screenshot of a course that we made, this pilot course on patient registries. And well, actually, we can make some content, for with this aim of educating and empowering patients regarding different aspects related to research in rare diseases. And here in the bottom, there is the it's a screenshot of the podcast that we have. As Begoña said, it's in Spanish. We made a pilot in English, but nowadays our chapters of the podcast is only in Spanish, and we are really focused on Latin American audience too. And then regarding the community, we have a question and answers forum where users can either ask any questions and or share their experience, so they can respond to each other, and they can also find them among themselves. Also, we have here at the right side, you can see this graph. This corresponds to the functionality that we have in the platform, which is based in artificial intelligence and crosses the information that every user has in their profile regarding to symptoms, disease, and geographical information, so that each user can find their peers which are more similar to them. Not only the rest of users, but also patient organizations that are related to their own disease. And finally, regarding the research, well, I'm going to take a bit longer in this pillar now, because it's actually the main focus of this webinar. As you know, the research that we lead in Share4Rare is that based on patient-reported data. Patients which are patients or caregivers that are users of the platform Share4Rare can participate in the studies that are promoted in the platform. Sometimes they are promoted by patient organizations, sometimes are academic, but in either case, they can access to a study from their own profile, depending on their disease or their geographical information. Well, it depends on how we set the study, but they can access to it, they can donate their data, and that relevant information that we ask in the study through many questionnaires, and they do it in a safe environment, and knowing that at the end they will receive some feedback from the results of the study. So what kind of projects can we make, or can we undertake in the platform? Well, we have classified them in 5 types, but of course it depends on the need of each research group or each patient organization. That depending on their need, we can do different types. The first one is patient registries. We also can do studies of the natural history of disease, studies of the quality of life or the burden of a disease. We can use Share4Rare to create or validate scales, and also to correlate data from clinical images with patient-reported data. Let's see some examples of some of them. First example has to do with transversal studies. So that's not only for a specific condition, but for different rare diseases. We have made these 2 different studies, which are very, very recent in the platform, in collaboration with FEDER, which is the Spanish Federation of Rare Diseases here. in our country. We have made 2 different studies, which are both, the aim of both of them is to have an instant picture of the reality in Spain regarding the access to different services for rare diseases. The first one was specifically for psychological therapy, and the last one was regarding the rehabilitation services. As I said, the aim is to gain evidence on the real accessibility and see if there is equity in these services regarding the gender or age, regarding the territorial and the diseases of the patients, and also to see if what are the barriers for this access. Sometimes are economical or any other ones. So we have finished these 2 studies and now are working with the results and conclusions. Second example is a patient's observatory. This is a study promoted by Alpha One Spain organization, which is this organization for the Alpha One antitrypsin deficiency patients. They are making nowadays this study, which is a 3-year-long study, and we are collecting every 6 months data on different aspects related to the health of the patients, but also on the perception of the health that they have and on the perception that they have from the care they receive. So this is a very important information for the organization, because it's a not very known condition, and not only from the specialist and from the general health system, but also they need to know if how the disease evolves and how not only the disease but also the care of the patients. Next example has to do with the quality of life, with a study made for epidermolysis bullosa patients of children age. It's been promoted by DEBRA, which is DEBRA Spain, Piel de Mariposa, which is the organization here in Spain. And the sample size was very, very small. It was only finally 7 girls which participated. And the aim of this study was to see if they could, at some extent, make any recommendation on the use of barefoot shoes for improving the quality of life of these children. In terms of the look, the injuries in their feet skin, the time of pain-free walking, and some other aspects. It involved different questionnaires and also it involved the use and the analyzing of some photographies from the feet. So the dermatologist in the research team, they could analyze these images and compare the results of the images with the results of the questionnaires in terms of quality of life. One more example, it has to do with the Hittelmann's syndrome and the prognosis and the quality of life of the patients. It's a study which is now on course, and it has to do with quality of life, which the data is collected from many validated questionnaires. not only for patients, but also for caregivers and families. And the aim is to see if there is a relation between the symptoms, the quality of life, and the severity of disease. And finally, I wanted to talk to you about the correlation of clinical image and patient-reported data. This is a new functionality of the platform. And we are doing a pilot study for testing it. And actually, we have already collected the patient-reported data, and now are analyzing the images. The sample for this study is a group of 14 female patients with Rett syndrome. And we have been comparing to trying to correlate the images, the clinical images, the brain image, and correlate it with different variables from quality of life, which have been collected through the two specific questionnaires for Rett syndrome in terms of quality of life, regarding the motricity, epilepsy, sleep, and respiratory disorders, and the behavior that they have been reported. And now, I'm going to give my word to Diana, who is going to explain you about the support that we can give you in terms of research for implementing a project in the platform. So Diana.
Yes, I'm here. My name is Diana Garcia. Good afternoon with all of you. And I work with on the Begoña's and Elena's team as a project manager, as project focus on patient and caregivers experience in research. Thank you for being here today. Now, as a final point today, we would like to present the process. Next slide, please, Elena. We will like to present the process for receiving and evaluating research project, which is currently open. This process began on 25 February and will close on 31st May of this year. It's important to know that this is a non-competitive process. However, it is necessary in order to assess whether the idea or project proposed by associations or research centers fits within our platform and the service we offer. The process itself, it's simple. And all the information, including the step-by-step instructions, is available on our website. First, you will need to complete the research service request form, in which we ask to details about the project. For example, the objective, the methodology, the study population, the number of patients or families you hope to reach, or the duration of the study. We kindly request that this document be filled in as completely as possible. We understand that you may not be able to complete every section, and that is perfectly fine. You can still submit it. Once you have it as complete as possible, you must send it to our email address, and the Share4Rare coordination team will review it to assess its feasibility. Follow this, we will organize an online meeting with the designated contact person. Together, we will evaluate the needs of the study and agree on the service required. Based on this information, we will then provide the applicant with the project budget. At this point, I would like to clarify something important. It's not possible to estimate average or base budget because each project is unique with its own specific needs and requirements, and the budget is based entirely on these elements. Once the applicant has reviewed the budget and given their approval, the final budget will be generated. This must then be formally accepted, and the applicant will need to complete the financial commitment letter. When we receive this signed document, our collaboration will officially begin. As mentioned earlier, all this information is available in our website, and I will now share the link in the chat. And that is all for us. The next slide. Next. Yes. And that is all for us. And thank you very much for your attention. And now we will now move on the question.
Yes, thanks, Diana. But first, if you have any question, you can, of course, put it in the chat, and we will now make a quick review and try to solve them. But first, let me just go through the different services that may support, from Share4Rare that may support your project in the platform. Because as Diana said in the form that you need to fill, then there we ask you to fill in what kind of services you need. So let me just first explain you a bit about them, so you know what they are about. In the first phase of an implementation of the study, we need to do the design of this study. Probably you already know how to design it or how to do it, but in case you need any support in the questionnaire design, in knowing the sample size that it's needed for achieving the goals, or what are the statistical variables that are most convenient, we can help you in that, as well as in the protocol development. As you know, there must be an authorization from an ethics committee. This is the second stage of the implementation of a project in Share4Rare. So in order to have the approval from the ethics committee, we need to fill out a protocol form and also a submission form. We can help you in that, in detailing all the aspects that the ethics committee asks regarding the legal aspects, or how data is treated, regarding the informed consent, which is used for the study, all these kinds of information. The third stage is the implementation itself. As it is an online implementation in the platform, we need to set all these questionnaires in the platform itself. So these questionnaires may be in the language that is needed, which is either English or any other language. As Begonia said before, the platform is ready in many languages, but we could implement a new language if it was needed. Regarding the recruitment, as you know, the platform has different users from different countries and diagnoses. So we can use this, well, actually for taking part, for participating in a study in Share4Rare, you need to be a user. So we can do the recruitment through all our community, or invite all these users to the study. Also, of course, there is a technical support and assistance, both for the research team, but also for the participant in the platform. And then also see if in the design we said that this questionnaire is going to be periodical, for example, we can set these iterations of the questionnaires. Once we have collected all the data from participants, all these results need to be treated and need to be analyzed. So there is a statistical analysis of the data, and for doing so, we pseudonymize the data and we process it with data science specialists, and then we finally get a report of the results to give back to the team, to the research team, and then also we can create a better, a more understandable document for the participants or for the general public. In the same way, if there is a further scientific publication of the results from Share4Rare, we can also give you support on that. And as we said, we can return all these results to the participants and to the general public, and in different ways. Either through an infographics, through a document, or through a webinar with the research team. So these are the different services related to the implementation of a research study in Share4Rare. And of course, any need or any question that you may have regarding this, you can just send us an email or just write the question in the chat, as Diana said before. So,
okay, now I'm just going to butt in there and say, first of all, thank you to both of you, all of you, for that really comprehensive explanation. We've got lots of questions in the chat, so I really want to move on and see if we can cover some of them now.
okay.
Would you mind switching off your sharing, and then we can see
Sure.
the audience again? Thank you ever so much. So
Okay.
I'm going to jump into the chat and just pluck a few questions that have come through. In particular, so I'm going to first go to Sandra, because hers was one of the first questions. We were looking at your education side of the platform and how people could share, how different disease groups had shared publications or posters, etc. And somebody, Sandra asked, how can information on a specific disease be added to your platform?
Yes, well, actually, the platform is for users. This part of the community is only for users. So Sandra should register as a user, and then go to the forum area and just make a contribution there. Yes, because I assume Sandra is a patient, right?
But she's talking about, Elena, the medical books and all this stuff, and
Oh,
this is
medical books,
open
sorry.
to everybody. You don't need to be a user. And to incorporate new medical books, usually it's a connection with a research project, because what we try to have is the advantage to update medical content based on the research that we have done. All the medical books that you see there were connected at some point with a research that we conducted in the platform.
That actually links in with one of John's questions later, which was around, how do you more widely share and publish the information? So once you've done a research study, that can be published on the platform itself as a resource there. You also mentioned, which I really love the idea of, supporting people once the research has been done to then publish in potentially a scientific journal, a peer-reviewed journal, which is important because then it becomes citable and therefore is shared more widely. And you also mentioned simplifying some of the findings so that they're more patient community friendly. You want to talk to us a little bit about that side of things?
Yeah, this is, let's say, part of our philosophy when we do projects led by a patient organization. It's important that we can communicate the outcomes, first of all, to the participants in the research, because it's a lot of, work behind finding the info, completing the questionnaires, etc. It's a lot of commitment there. And we try to work together in a live version to communicate the results. It depends of the project. It can be a webinar, it can be, a short animation video, depends of the project. And also all these live version summary results are included as well in a section in the medical books, because it's important that this information will remain in these medical books, because not all the content comes from the research project, but it's important that the people that access to these medical books, they know which is the outcome of a research conducted in the field.
Yeah, I suppose particularly in rare diseases, it's so important that research doesn't just get shelved somewhere.
Yeah.
That it's as publicly available as possible. John also asked if you could give some examples of further outcomes of the different research projects. So you talked about some really fascinating projects there. A lot of them, I think for us, are the things that matter to families and people with conditions most. And that's sometimes the stuff that's overlooked, what would make a real difference to people's everyday lives. I mean, the project that you showed about the shoes for children with EB, I mean, that's a really classic example of something that the patient community wants. But they can't just recommend something without having, that research paper to back it up. So can you tell us a little bit more about, the kind of projects that work well with you and how they go on to enhance things for the patient communities, whether that's by finding an everyday solution or even in some cases a treatment?
Yeah, I have one example that I think that illustrates a little bit, what can be a very meaningful result from, the research that we do in terms of the quality of life and the care of the patients. We conducted a study for an ultra-rare condition in which we described the natural history of the disease. And it's not the same when you have one or two patients at site hospital level. And sometimes these conditions, as I mentioned, can be very heterogeneous. Probably patient A and patient B are absolutely, different, the symptoms, the effect of the treatments, etc. And we did this study, and what we saw is that was common, a symptom that initially at individual level, we never thought that, this symptom happened. And it's a symptom that it's manageable if you have some prophylactic treatment. And with a prophylactic treatment in this condition, we could prevent the bleeding problem in the operating theater when these kids were under a surgery of the eyes, because nobody knew that these kids, they had this problem, and instead to repair the cataracts, in the surgery at the end, we need to enucleate the eye of the kids. And if we know that these kids, they have a problem in the blood that you can prevent with a prophylactic treatment, that it's, I don't know the word in English, we couldn't stop, the blood during the surgery. But with a prophylactic treatment, it was manageable, and we could have a good success of a very conventional surgery that is, operate the cataracts of the kids.
So
It's a very simple,
Yeah.
case based in the opportunity that we had to study, in this case, 30 patients from Spain.
That's a lovely example of
Yeah.
how something that really matters a lot, but wasn't visible.
Yeah. We can save the eyes in this case because it was a bilateral cataract. We can save both eyes of the kids. But if you don't know and you don't treat, instead to have a successful surgery of cataracts, you need to enucleate the eye.
Okay, thank you. I'm just looking further on for some more questions. We're coming up towards time, but we've definitely got enough to squeeze a few more in.
Joe, I'm just going to jump in with a question that came up in the chat, but it also I think relates to some of the examples that Elena showed. So the question that came in the chat was, are people from other countries outside of Spain able to submit projects into Share4Rare? And I think you've already come back with the answer yes, but I'm also wondering, with some of those projects, are you also collaborating with other research centres, hospitals outside of Spain, where you've got a very small number of patients, to try and just find some more patients to help you get more data and be able to power some of those studies a little bit better?
Well, actually, all those studies that I presented as an example, they are already finished, and most of them were made in Spain. But of course, we are open. Actually, all these transversal or these cross-sectional studies that we were talking about, that we were presenting, for example, the one in the psychological services or the rehabilitation services, these are very, very good examples to escalate or to let's say copy these kind of studies in a different country. I don't know if that answers. Then the other question on collaborating with other organizations from different countries. Well, in terms of promoters of the studies, of course we work with different patient organizations at different levels, at different countries. So this is something that we want to work also, no? To being able to share the same project in between different organizations in order to enrich the project or to add more patients to the same study. This is something that it can be discussed, and we are really open to all these kind of studies of multilingual, multi-international. So yes, of course,
Of course, that's really important. Again, in rare conditions, we know that patient communities are really scattered. So being able to connect with people around the world is going to be critical in terms of data. Can you hear me, by the way? Because Donna mentioned that my sound had got quite quiet.
You're still a little bit faint, Joe. I don't know why. You were fine at the beginning, and then, as Donna said, you've gone a bit faint.
Which is kind of like me.
There we go. You're back.
Is that better?
You're back. Yes.
What happened, Donna? So thanks for telling me. I've been waffling on and no one can hear me. Okay, I've got one final question. Okay, this is from John. John, thank you for all your questions today. They've been very, very interesting and insightful. Do you hope that the patient experience data that may be collected will be compatible with future EMA requirements in the future to support clinical study submissions for review by CHMP or HTAs? That's quite a long question. Gonya has already said yes enthusiastically in a quick answer. But I wondered if anybody wanted to contribute, maybe Begonia or Elena, just to flesh that answer out a little bit.
Yeah, if you want, I can complement a little bit my answer. Let's say it's not a common practice, first of all, that research includes these kind of tools to collect data from patients. Secondly, of course, what it's recommended is that we use validated tools, but here what we have is a challenge in rare diseases, because in the majority of the rare diseases, we don't have a specific validated tool. Sometimes we use general, scales for oncology, neurology conditions, whatever the area. Something that we are trying to encourage and promote in the communities of patients is to do projects to build these tools. Because even if these general tools for therapeutical area are validated, it doesn't mean that they can work for all the conditions under this umbrella of oncology, neurology, or the specific area. Still, we need more research in the field, but of course, if there is a right PRO or PREM for your therapeutical area, we can work with these tools and collect the data. Said this, for the HTA bodies, it depends what you want as well to measure, depending of the benefit of the treatment that we are assessing. It's not, let's say, that one solution can work for all the diseases. The platform is there, validated tools are there, but depending of the disease, what we try to do is assess which is the best scenario, because probably even if we have a general validated tool, probably it's not the best one. Said this, there is the option of qualitative research methods that at some point, at least for regulatory purpose, can be used. But here, sometimes what we have is the small numbers challenge, because it's not the same a tool that can be completed by a small community, but for the majority of them, than, for example, a focus group that probably it means that you need to organize more than one session to have the same number. What we try to do, if it's any interest from a specific patient community, it's to have a one-to-one call and see which is the purpose of these tools, what we have, and if we can use these ones, or probably also help in the process to validate a tool. But it needs to be assessed case by case. Sorry.
So I think we're coming to a close now. It's 2:00 and that hour has absolutely flown by. I just want to thank our three speakers today, Begonia, Elena, and Diana. I think what you've created through Share4Rare is really excellent. What a resource for patient communities to be able to come to you to get support in bringing their research to life. And this is exactly the kind of partnership that we were hoping for the Rare Disease Research Network. Our platform can provide patient communities with a place to share their ideas, but we still need to connect them with the right people to take that forward. So hence why we're really advocating for joining the RDRN platform, taking a look also at the Share4Rare platform, considering, what is it our community needs to see happen next? What's the burning research questions that matter to them? What could we start to do with a group like Share4Rare to collect more data, to contribute to data banks so that we can begin to develop better and more treatments? So I think the important thing for me is that when we find good partners like Share4Rare, we want people to really utilize that service. We love what you do because you think in the same way as we do about patient communities, that they need to be at the heart of this, and that what they think and feel matters. You talked about perception quite a few times, and I think that's something we don't hear enough about. Not just the data and the facts and the figures, but what's your perception of your condition and how it impacts your daily life. So think just a big thank you all round for everyone who's attended, everyone who's helped put this together, and to Share4Rare for the great work that they're doing.